This is Push Button Influence, where the world's leading influencers candidly share their exact strategies for maximizing reach, accelerating growth, and generating massive exposure, all by leveraging the power of new media. You can become the next Larry King, Oprah, or Howard Stern. All you need to do is broadcast your brilliance. Push Button Influence teaches you how. Here are your hosts, Alex Mandossian and Steve Olsher.
All right. Welcome to another edition here of I almost said it, Push Button Influence. It was good for that to happen at some point, and now it did, but here we are on Push Button Influence with the one and only Alex Mandossian and myself, Steve Olsher, and Ocean Robbins. How cool is that, man? Knowing how busy you are, because you actually have a pretty big thing in the works right around the corner. So for you to take the time to be with us here on PBI is greatly appreciated. So let's do this, which is, Ocean, we start every show with a word, and both Alex and I have a word. And let me turn it over to the one, the only, Alex Mandossian. What is your word of the day for Mr. Ocean Robbins?
All right, well, there are two ahas for today. First of all, it's the first time Ocean is on Blab, according to Blab. I don't know if that's true or not. And secondly, he and I have never crossed paths on a virtual event, although we've done tons of gigs like this or on stage. So my word was going to be, because of his lineage and because of what he stands for, it was going to be food. And one of my mentors taught me 20 years ago when I was a sophomore in college, 1984, when the family moved to California, according to your website, Ocean. I was at UC Irvine. Food is the most powerful drug on earth. And I thought, wow, what a great topic. But to me, what you represent is movement. Einstein,
I got to change my word.
Nothing happens until something moves. So this is movement as the noun and not the verb. It's one of the only words where, when used as a noun, it has more power than as a verb. So let's talk about the specific incident, where you were, who surrounded you, if you can remember. I'm putting you on the spot, but it's my job. It's your first time on Blab and first time we're interviewing each other. When did you decide that you could be a movement builder? Because that is something that you are.
I decided that when I was 7 years old, honestly. I was in elementary school in second grade, and the movie The Day After came out, which was about nuclear holocaust. And, it was a television special, and all my friends were talking about it. And I was thinking, what, are we just going to stand by and allow this possibility that these weapons of unimaginable destructive power could actually be used someday on human beings? And so I organized a peace rally in my elementary school at lunchtime. Got about a bunch of my friends out there. We made little signs. We were just screaming to each other. Everyone in the school agreed we don't want nuclear war. That's not a very controversial topic. But, I saw right then that I could speak out and organize, and people could follow, and we could have a voice.
Awesome. It is so funny. And I have to admit that this was also my word. So great minds think alike there. And if you're on Blab, you see that my word was also movement, but I have quickly changed it because I can adapt quickly like that. So let's move to this word, which is community. And you, Ocean, obviously, you started at a super young age in terms of trying to create community around what you were really just, let's put it as bluntly as we can. You were just fired up about that at that moment. You're fired up about this at this moment. This is like, does it become sort of your life's calling in that particular period of time to then enroll people in whatever it is that you just absolutely feel, so passionate about?
Well, to me, leadership is about standing for something. It's not about having a bunch of followers. It's about being willing to step outside the herd to do something different than the norm or the status quo, because you were born for something other than to repeat the patterns of what you see going on around you. And in the world in which we live, in which it is considered normal to, for example, in the food world, eat food that is full of pesticides, hormones, antibiotics, that's been stripped of fiber, that's full of added sugars and chemicals and flavorings and additives, in which it's considered normal to eat food that is, quite frankly, toxic. It's causing epidemic rates of diabetes, obesity, Alzheimer's, cancer, heart disease. In that world, I think leadership is the only sane option. Because if we follow the status quo, we will follow it right to our hospital beds and our graves. But if we're willing to take a stand for what's possible, we can radically extend our lifespan, our health span, our vibrancy, our joy, improve our sex lives, have more fulfilling lives on this planet. And so to me, when I stand for a food revolution, which is what my work is all about right now, I'm standing for something that to me is very basic. It's about sanity, and yet it's also radical. And so that's what leadership is about to me. And so when we think about what it means to have your life stand for something, I mean, what's the saying? If you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything. I think all of us in this world are faced with the reality that the status quo isn't cutting it. We're surrounded by norms, not just with food, but with so many other kinds of life choices that are just quite frankly not fulfilling. The idea of the typical, corporate job, working crazy hours for somebody else to make a bunch of money, doing something you don't believe in, doing something that doesn't fundamentally matter to the world just so you can survive, that's not fulfilling to very many people anymore. And so more and more people are saying, how do I get out of this? And how do I find something that matters to me so that my life means something to the people that I love, to the planet, and expresses something of my signature? Right?
Yeah, and that in itself is really a community of people who want to move beyond the working norms, if you will, that have really been a part of our society now for, at least a good century, if not more. So in and of itself, that is a community of people who believe what you believe, and you have been enrolling them now for years, obviously, into visions. At this point, it's obviously the food revolution vision.
Yeah, absolutely. But here's the awesome thing. If you want healthy food, if you want a healthy planet, if you want government policy that actually supports healthy food instead of subsidizing junk food, you're not alone. In fact, there are many, 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 many people like you who are completely fed up with toxic food, who are sick of being sick, who are hungry for change, and who are doing something about it. I mean, people are willing to spend more for organic food. Organic food consumption has quadrupled in the last decade in the United States. It's just growing so fast. Non-GMO certified food has gone from nothing to over $7 billion in sales in the last 4 years. 90% of the North American public supports labeling of GMOs. These are not little tiny voices in the wilderness. This is the norm right now. That more and more people want change. And unfortunately, government policy and corporate food industry policy are lagging behind. But that's not going to last for long. McDonald's closed 700 restaurants last year in North America. We are part of epic changes that are taking place right now. Farmers markets, community-supported agriculture are exploding. The food industry giants are all taking notice because they're realizing that what made them so successful in the last century is going to lead to them being destroyed this century if they don't make changes. Because consumers don't want junk food anymore.
Yeah. Alex?
I want to talk about core values. You hear integrity, commitment, and all sorts of core values in the corporate structure. But I'm going to come back to this word again, food, because I've noticed that when fitness and health is gone, then all the other core values are in the trash can. And what leads to fitness and washboard abs and good looks is, the gym, but really what goes in prior and after the gym. So have you worked with companies, organizations, or any movements where food itself is part of the core value structure? Because I have yet to see corporations adopt that, other than Google having, decent food in their cafeterias, et cetera. But it's not a priority for most folks. And most people just roll their eyes and go, oh, whatever.
Yeah. Well, there have been some forays into it. Whole Foods Market is self-insured, and they took their 50,000 employees and they started developing some pilot programs where they would take them through some health training course immersions and then see if they could, and they did manage to arrest their health insurance premiums were going up and up and up like they were for everyone else. And they managed to stop that and reverse that. by focusing on health education with their employees. But they discovered, as I think a lot of companies do, that it's actually harder than you might think to go against the stream of a norm in society. And you might think Whole Foods Market employees are healthier than the norm, and they might be a little bit, but strikingly, they're not that different than Safeway employees or any other major supermarket, because they're just working a job, right? And yeah, they may shop at Whole Foods, but quite frankly, if you think Whole Foods is only selling health food, then you haven't really taken a serious look at it. So the bottom line is that they were able to make some inroads. But I think that what it's going to take to fundamentally help large sectors of the population move in healthier directions is going to be more than any one company can do by itself. We definitely need larger system policy shift. We need fundamentally a government that is accountable to the people instead of just the moneyed interests that put our political leaders into power. And in the food sector, that looks like ceasing to spend tens of billions of dollars subsidizing commodities crops, which is basically high fructose corn syrup and factory farm animal products. It means if we're going to subsidize anything, we ought to be subsidizing healthy food. It means getting junk food advertising away from kids. It means recognizing that sugary sodas are an epidemic like cigarettes, and we need to treat them similarly to how we treated cigarettes a generation ago, which is to tax them and to use that tax money for education, and probably, quite frankly, to put some warning labels on those packages. The evidence is that clear. And if we're serious about reversing diabetes and heart disease, about not spending 19% of our gross domestic product on disease treatment, if we're serious about looking out for the health and well-being of our population, then these are no-brainer choices we need to make. So I'm excited about the opportunity that exists, and there are definitely companies that are piloting, making some shifts, and I think it's critically important, because if a company wants their employees to be healthy and productive and vibrant and smart and engaged for a long time, then investing in health and wellness is kind of a no-brainer. But what I think Whole Foods saw is that if all of the costs of making that shift are borne by one company, it can be a little tricky to make it cost-effective. They're still trying to crack that nut and figure out how they actually make a positive ROI on their investment. They want to be able to do that so other companies can follow, and they're still trying to figure it out.
Yeah, and let's do this, man, because I think it's really important for those who don't know you to have an understanding of really what you said no to in order to say yes to creating this whole movement around food. So talk a little bit about, let's put it on the table, man. Who's your grandfather?
Okay. So my grandfather was Irvin Robbins, and he founded with his brother-in-law, Bert Baskin, a little ice cream company called Baskin Robbins, which became the world's largest ice cream company. My dad grew up with 31 flavors of ice cream in the freezer at all times and an ice cream cone-shaped swimming pool in the backyard. And he was groomed from early childhood to one day join in running the family company. But when he was in his early 20s, he was offered that chance, and he said no. And he walked away from fame and fortune and a path that was practically paved with gold as well as ice cream to, as we jokingly say in our family, follow his own rocky road. At that time, his uncle, Bert Baskin, was dying of heart disease. And, he was one of the most successful entrepreneurs in American history. He had a family he loved, but he didn't have his health. And so he didn't have his life. And he left his wife a widow and his kids fatherless, my dad's cousins. I didn't know my dad's Uncle Bert. I just know about him from family stories. But I feel sad that I never got to know him. My dad saw what was going down. He said, I don't want to spend my life promoting a product that's going to lead to more kids losing their dads. So I want to stand up for a healthy life. And so he ended up moving with my mom to a little island off the coast of British Columbia, Canada, where they built a one-room log cabin. They grew most of their own food. They practiced yoga and meditation for several hours a day, and they named their kid Ocean. That's me. And so I grew up, monetarily poor, but feeling rich because I had time with my mom and dad. And quite frankly, I had a family that believed in something more than the almighty dollar, which was integrity and values. Then my dad wound up becoming a best-selling author, writing books about food and health. The media called him the rebel without a phone. My grandpa ended up being given a copy of my dad's book, Diet for New America, by his doctor at a time when he was facing serious life-threatening heart disease and diabetes and weight issues. He read it. He made big changes in his diet, gave up ice cream, lost 30 pounds. Golf game improved 7 strokes. He added 20 healthy years to his life. My dad and I at that time were marathon runners. I ran my first marathon when I was 10 years old. I remember visiting my grandpa, and we were running out for our morning run, and he was out for his morning hike. He was well enough that he was now hiking 5 miles in the morning. And the experience of us jogging by him and him cheering us on as we're out there, I was just thinking, how lucky are we to have our health? My grandpa's brother-in-law didn't get a second chance, and he lost his life. My grandpa did get a second chance, thank goodness. Thanks in part to the work my dad did. He took it and he regained his life, and he had 20 healthy years. So we've seen in our family what food means and the difference it can make. And now I'm working with my dad directly. I spent 20 years directing a nonprofit and organizing young leaders around the planet and building community with change makers globally. And then I moved with my dad 4.5 years ago to join forces, and we launched the Food Revolution Network, and we now have over 250,000 members. And we're standing up for healthy, sustainable, humane, and delicious food. And there's not a day that goes by that I don't get such thanks that I get to now work directly to help change people's lives for the better. I get to work with my dad and participate in, quite frankly, a family story, a family lineage that I'm proud to be part of. I'm proud of my grandpa for his business achievements. I'm even more proud of him for having the courage to listen to his renegade son and make those changes. Because I think if he can do it, if he could give up ice cream, for goodness sakes, there's hope for the rest of us too.
Yeah, Alex?
Well, when there's differences in spiritual traditions, sometimes that breaks up a household. But people don't think of food and dietary commitment as breaking up households. And it has in my family. I come from an Armenian tradition, and it's not always health conscious, other than tabbouleh and some other whole foods, right? So what's your sense? I mean, you have resolution in your family through the lineage between grandfather, father, and you, but there are many families that just literally break up because of differences in food, and people don't ever.
Right, absolutely. Well, I mean, it's true. I mean, food is both a great uniter and a great divider. Through history, breaking bread together, sharing a meal together has been an act of communion and connection between people, and it still is today. I think one of the most powerful ways to advocate for healthy eating with your social circles is to share food with people and to make food for people. When they discover that healthy food can be delicious and convenient, especially if you make it for them, then that's just an incredible generosity. And making someone a really good, healthy meal might be one of the greatest gifts you ever give them if it turns them on to what's possible and helps them, nurture them on that path. So I think that's a beautiful action. At the same token, a lot of people are pulled off course by relatives and peers who, we celebrate birthdays, weddings, holidays with junk food, with cake, with sugar, we reward our kids with candy. And in that way, we are conditioning our psychology and our minds to say that junk food is a treat, that it's something you do to reward yourself, to celebrate life, to enjoy life. And we don't sit down and say, oh, I've had a really stressful work week, so I'm going to treat myself to a nice bowl of steamed broccoli. But you know what? We can. It's possible that you can actually rewire your brain so that because you wouldn't say, oh, I've had a stressful week, I'm going to treat myself to some sugar that's going to increase my odds of diabetes and cancer and heart disease and being a drain on my loved ones as I suffer from Alzheimer's in my senior years. You wouldn't say that, right? But if you're really honest with yourself, that's where you're headed when you make certain food choices.
Yeah, have a bowl of death.
Yeah, right. Who wants that, right? So it is possible to actually literally recondition your mind so that you associate healthy food with life, with love, with joy, with purpose and meaning and values, right?
Yeah.
And that's what I want to stand for, is helping people make those kinds of choices. But it's true, if you're in a family that doesn't eat like you do, and you're struggling with that, then obviously you want to educate, obviously you want to share, obviously you lead by example first and foremost. If you're happy, if you're fulfilled, if your health is improving, then you can present that, and that's hard to argue with. If it's working for you, who's going to argue? If people love you, if they care about you, then of course they should want you to be well, more than they want to be reinforced for their own dogmas and beliefs and habits, right? But I think that there comes a place sometimes in some families where you've got to agree to disagree and to say, hey, you know what? what I'm doing is working for me, and I'd like to ask your respect. You know? And most people, if they care about you, are going to say yes to that. You know, they may not agree with you, they may not want to eat like you, but at least they can respect you. And maybe they'll go a step forward and give it a try, right? And just share, even when you're eating meals, they may not have to eat healthy all the time, but maybe they can eat healthy with you. And if you've suffered from a health ailment, or you're recovering from one, or you're afraid of one, then you can say, you know what, I have special needs. And I'd like to ask for your support. You know, you don't drink alcohol around recovering alcoholics. You don't smoke around someone who's trying to give up smoking. That's just basic decency. Not everyone observes it, but we should, right? So if you're struggling to make a change in your life and you are a little weak, you can be upfront about that and you ask people for help.
So let's do this, because we obviously want to talk about, well, a lot of things, not the least of which, of course, is the food revolution.
Yeah.
You would think that, I mean, hearing you talk, and I mean, everything that you say, literally everything that you say, I'm thinking, yeah, he's right. So like, I don't even know how anybody could argue with the points that you're making, because they're so on target. So talk a little bit about enrolling, right? Because you said you had 250,000 members in the Food Revolution community. Shouldn't that be like 25 million? I mean, like, why, what? So how do you get from 250,000 to 25 million, which frankly doesn't seem, I mean, it doesn't seem like a stretch.
Well, you know, we've only been around 4 years, so we've gone from 0 to 250 in 4 years. So hopefully we can, you know, multiply that manyfold in the next 4 years. But here's the deal. I think that the food revolution is a lot bigger than one email list and one organization. I think that the food revolution is everybody who is saying no to toxic food and yes to real food. You know, food that's not full of chemicals and pesticides and adulteration, more food that comes from plants instead of being produced in plants. You know, quite frankly, more food the way that God or nature intended, and less of the, you know, the processed junk that's making a few companies rich, but making a lot of us sick. So to me, that's the food revolution. And we are reaching so many people right now. I think there are tens of millions of people who are making changes. And that's why corporate practices are shifting. And it's why natural food sales are exploding. It's why organic food sales were over $50 billion last year in the United States. And it's why agricultural practices are starting to shift. I mean, in the US, we actually grow very little of our own organic food. You know, that less than 1% of our acreage is organic, even though 5% of our food sales are organic. So we're importing a lot of our organic food from China and Mexico and other countries, which is kind of ridiculous because they're getting the benefit of having less pesticides in their environment and in their water, and we're not getting those benefits. So we got to stop outsourcing that, right? But agricultural practice is shifting. And in fact, for 50 years, every year in the United States, we had less farms and less farmers because there was this consolidation happening. And that trend has shifted in the last few years because we're starting to see more young people taking an interest in farming and more family farms again. And because people want local food and they care where their food comes from. And fair trade is another place where we're seeing just epic growth because people actually turns out people don't want slavery in their chocolate. Turns out most people, when given a choice, would rather the people who grow their food actually have the ability and the means to feed their family and live if they work hard. And so we're seeing big changes, and I think we're seeing more transparency, and the internet has helped make that happen. So now people understand more what's at stake and where their food's coming from. So we're growing fast, we're spreading the word, and quite frankly, I'd love to see the Food Revolution Network grow too. And you know, our particular model is we offer a lot of free resources. People can come on board if they like what they're getting. They can upgrade and pay for something, and that's what funds our work. And we have affiliates that spread the word. They promote it. They promote the free events, and then they receive half the revenues when their referrals come on board with us. And it's a real win-win. And we apply high-level, top-notch internet marketing skills to help market healthy eating and healthy lifestyle and the programs that we offer. And we're really passionate that the people who come on board to our launches and our events are going to have a fantastic life-changing experience if they don't spend a dime, and that we're going to really make the benefits clear of what's possible if they get some of the upgrade packages. And in that way, we help fund all the work and make it appealing for the affiliates.
Mm-hmm. Alex?
What age range, in your experience, is the least resistant to eating more healthy, Robin. My dad is 82 today, February 24th, and he turned 82 today. He looks better at 82 than he did at 72, and two things are responsible: a heart attack at American Airlines, and it was the safest place to have one because they had defibrillators. And every year there's an American Airlines, and I think other airlines have people they've revived at the airport. It's the safest place to have a heart attack is in an airport, if anyone doesn't realize that. But because of that heart attack, he's eating better, and he's doing yoga. So food and yoga have changed his lifestyles. But his age range and baby boomers. I'm on the tail end of the baby boom. I'm 1964. There's resistance. But where have you found the least amount of resistance based on your experience, where people are willing to make shifts or just are natural?
To be honest with you, we're seeing change at every sector of society. We're seeing change in all political stripes and all ethnicities. I mean, in general, so far, the food movement, the benefits of the food movement have been most reaped by the more affluent sectors of society. That's where you see the most whole foods shopping. That's where you see the most organic foods consumption. So a lot of times it's the poorest communities that are suffering the most from toxic food. But there's also big change happening, right? I mean, so it's absolutely true that indigenous people, African Americans, Latino people have the lowest life expectancy and the highest rates of lifestyle-related illness and the worst diet typically because of poverty, right? But that is starting to change. Our school lunches have improved significantly. They have a long way to go, but they've improved significantly.
The joys, right?
I thought that was going to happen after we lost him, but I was going to ask him about Scotland because they have a very high death rate because of food and fried Mars bars. So I couldn't get to that question. But back here.
We will. That's the joy of live streaming. So Ocean conspiracy. That's funny, James. So go ahead and just hit your refresh on your browser, and then you'll just have to call back in.
That was probably the Mars company, getting him out or something.
Oh, that's funny. And there he is. Yay! All right. So that's the beauty of doing a live show: is anything can happen, which is part of the fun here. Right there, we go.
I don't. Monsanto was responsible for that.
That's funny. Yeah. So, let's do this. For those who are just joining the show, thanks for joining us here live on Blab, where Push Button Influence, every Wednesday at 4 p.m. Pacific, we just bring in the most amazing people to share with you really what they're up to and their strategies for having push button influence with, if you missed it earlier, Ocean, 250,000 members of the Food Revolution Network, and also doing so many other amazing things. So you certainly personify push button influence. Is just it's awesome to have you here, man. So let's just ask this, and I know we kind of get cut off there just a wee little bit, but I want to talk about the future of food, because it's interesting, right? I mean, you've got organic, you've got natural and all that, and I'd love for just clarification on the difference between the two. But Peter Shankman is actually going to be joining us next week on the show, and he does a lot of interesting things, not the least of which is as an investor. And one of the companies that he's an investor in is a company that creates food via 3D printing, which is like way above here for me. Yeah. But I mean, clearly that is part of the future of food. Can you explain to those who don't know, including me, how exactly you could even do food if you know through 3D printing, and then what you see as the future of food?
Well, I think you can ask him about that. I don't know the scientific
me neither.
process of 3D printing is a little over past my pay grade. But what I will say is that clearly technology and science are powerful forces, and they're an important part of the solution. Just as data is an important part of the solution. I mean, we need to look at what works and what actually happens. But it's very critically important that you measure the right things. For example, we tend to measure yield. And we look at 70% of the world's food is actually grown by small-scale farmers, most of them in their own backyards around the world, right? And there's this push towards mega corporate industrialized agriculture with lots of chemical inputs. which can generate more yield per acre of whatever it is you're measuring. But what we tend to forget is that traditional farmers in their own backyards grow a whole lot of things. And it's that biodiversity that helps keep away pests. And it also helps replenish the soil because different plants affect the soil in different ways. When you just grow one crop over and over and over again, you take certain nutrients out of the soil and you don't replenish them, right? Unless you're just putting chemical fertilizers in, but the soil gets really depleted. And you end up, chemical intensive agriculture is less able to absorb water. It's less of a sponge and takes more water, therefore. And it's more prone to floods as well as droughts. So small scale farming with lots of biodiversity is a lot more responsive, especially in times of climate change. And it can actually generate more total food. If you look at the whole basket of all the different things that people are growing, and they eat it right there, and there's more food security in that, rather than one monocrop. And then they're dependent on all these other foods that come from far away, and you get this mass production food system. My point is that what we measure matters. And that sometimes science can think, oh, we're getting more cotton in India, for example, right? Cotton production in India has been growing rapidly. But there were 250,000 farmer suicides in India in the last couple of decades. Farmers are literally taking their own lives because they're in so much debt they can't ever repay it. So they drink their own pesticides and die by the hundreds of thousands, right? And this is, if there's 250,000 killing themselves, how many millions are feeling devastated and not actually taking their own lives? This is tied to debt. And that debt is tied to economic forces that have pushed them into a system where they're dependent on more and more external inputs and they're less self-reliant and they're not actually able to feed their own families anymore. So we have to be thoughtful about what we're measuring, because on paper, India's economy is booming. But when you actually look at the world poor, many people are dying. And so similarly, I think we've got to be very thoughtful about the role of science. And the more holistic we can be in looking at the whole picture, the more effective we'll be in actually appraising what works and what doesn't. There are huge breakthroughs in farming and agriculture and productivity, but they're not always based on more test tubes. Sometimes they're based on better understanding of how ladybugs can eat aphids, right? And how we can replenish the soil and actually take carbon out of the atmosphere and put it into the soil through rotational grazing, through practices where we're bringing in, cover crops, through no-till farming, through other practices that can regenerate our soil and make it more vibrant and life-giving.
Interesting. Alex?
I want to make an announcement and going to Q&A in about 15 minutes, Steve. And then to lighten things up, a pre-Oscar party, we have one of our guests coming in. And the topic will probably be more in the cocktail range of food, because there'll be a bunch of celebs there. And she will be chiming in this channel. So stay tuned for that. It'll be a complete shift. I want to go back to the seriousness of the matter and how you lighten things up, Ocean, because you strike me as someone who is just grounded and happy in general. That's how you've come across when I've seen you or when I've read your material. How do you make such serious issues such as food and diet? How do you make light of it so that people actually are following along without getting too serious about it, like global warming or any other political?
Right. Yeah. Well, we have to, because if we are bored, boring, cynical, apathetic, miserable people, who's going to follow us, right? Food should be fun. Food should be nourishing. Food should be beautiful. And quite frankly, if your relationship to food is full of fear and dread and suffering, then what are you taking into your body? Have you ever, let me just ask you this, have you ever had somebody that you love who tells you they love you and you're distracted and it doesn't really matter? Like, you just don't notice, really. I mean, you say, oh, thanks so much, but it goes in one ear and one out the other.
That would be Mom.
And have you also had the experience, this happened before?
Yeah, that would be Mom, Carol Mondo.
Okay. Have you ever had the experience, maybe not with Mom, maybe with Mom, but where somebody tells you they love you and it penetrates to the depths of your soul? Like, it just goes right into you, right? And one of the differences is your state of consciousness, how present you are for that interaction. Right. So my suggestion is that in your relationship with food, you actually have the opportunity to partake of love or to partake of apathy and disconnection. And that when just a moment of saying grace, just a moment of smelling food, just a moment of feeling gratitude, of being in relationship to it, can actually prepare you to take it into your body in a different way. We know scientifically that salivation is part of the digestive process, and that part of what triggers salivation is the anticipation of food. And part of what helps us anticipate it is noticing it. And in this today's hyped up, busy world, we're so busy sometimes we don't even notice. So one of my key things with food is let's celebrate, let's appreciate, let's bring magic and joy and beauty and reverence and wonder into our relationship with food. I mean, how awesome is it that we can eat it all? And then we get to choose what we eat. Most human beings down through history haven't been able to do that. And then we get to eat food that we love and that actually nourishes us and that helps us thrive. So I love bringing gratitude and joy and delight into my food life.
Well, one more question, Steve. Aside from the actual food itself, the container where food is served, the family dinner has gone away. I had dinner with my family every single night, and now I actually have to go out of my way as a single dad to have my kids and I sit together at dinner, so I'm not standing up, shoveling food in my mouth while they're eating and going back to homework. So do you speak to that at all, to the community and how to hold a container sacred so that regardless of the food that's being eaten, at least eat it together? Because families that do eat together do stay together.
Well, it's true. It's true. And so, I think that a family that takes even a moment to express gratitude, that's one of the most beautiful things. Just go around and everyone say something they're grateful for. It puts your physiology into a receptive state, a state of gratitude, which actually helps you to absorb the food more effectively. And of course, it builds connection, within a family, right? And so I think that the act of sharing a meal together, not just being in front of the TV set the entire time, actually taking time to talk, is unfortunately revolutionary in today's world. But it's good for family values. It's good for connection. It builds more love. And I think it helps you digest your food better as well. And so, you may not be able to do that every meal or even every day. But if you can even have a couple times a week, where the family gets together and actually shares a meal, actually spends 45 minutes sitting at the table together, and you put a little extra something into that meal, and it's not just popped out of the microwave. People can connect around that, and I think connection around food is one of the great losses of our times. But also, there's such richness in beauty and in reclaiming it.
Yeah. And for those who are here with us live at about 1:15, we will drop back into the green room and end the podcast version. You'll have a chance to ask Ocean your questions, and then a special bonus for those who join us live here in the green room, as we are having a little, as Alex said, a little pre-Oscar celebration with some folks that'll be joining us. So that should be a lot of fun as well. Now, when we first thought about, hey, what can Ocean really talk about? And obviously, you can talk about a lot of things, but one of the topics that I know people have interest in, Ocean, is this whole idea around a summit, right? And so, the food revolution, I mean, that is a summit. Can you speak to what a summit actually is and why it is your preferred mechanism for marketing and sharing what you're doing with the food revolution, and maybe how others can take advantage of that same sort of concept?
Sure, absolutely. Well, what we do in the Food Revolution Summit, which you can find out about at foodrevolutionsummit.org, that's about the last summit that we held. But you can join in there, and then you can be on our list and learn about the next summit when the time comes. Again, that's foodrevolutionsummit.org. We take the opportunity to interview some of the top food experts on the planet. My dad conducts those interviews personally, and he's, of course, the best-selling author on food and health issues, Ocean Robbins. And then we broadcast those. And, the basic model of any telesummit is that the interviews are broadcast for free. People can opt in and listen to any or all of them. In our case, we broadcast 3 per day for 8 days. And they're on 24-hour replays. People can join in the broadcasts, or they can listen on replay afterwards. And so what we love about that model is that we're giving a ton away for free. And if people want to own the MP3s and transcripts for life, then they get that opportunity. So it's kind of like awesome, unlimited, not just free samples, but free content. But if you want the convenience of owning it any time, taking it on your iPod or iPhone, or, listening to it in the car, sharing it with friends and loved ones, if you want the transcripts, if you want a bunch of bonuses we put together, then you can pay a modest fee with a 60-day refund guarantee. And get the downloads of the whole content. And So that's what we put together. And, I think the beauty of it in that and any other form of internet marketing is if you can find ways to offer value for free that pull people in, and all they're giving essentially is their name and email address and the opportunity to be connected to you. And then you can offer them opportunities to go further for a fee. I just love that model because.
But let's just excuse me for 1 second. Time out, as Alex would say. You have. I mean, let's not gloss over it. And when you're talking about 24, people talk. It's not just 24 people talking about food. Talk about a couple of the people that you've had in the summit and who you're going to have in this year's summit. Because these are like rock star people.
Yeah. Our faculty includes people like Paul McCartney and Tony Robbins and.
Just
few little folks like that, Woody Harrelson and Jane Goodall, and this year we're also going to have Dr. Deepak Chopra, Dr. Christian Northrup, Joel Furman, Dean Ornish, Dr. Mark Hyman, Dr. David Perlmutter, a lot of pretty awesome folks. And obviously when you're first starting out, if you're organizing a telesummit, you may not be able to contact those kind of leaders. But everyone has a contact base, a web of relationships, and you're probably within 2 or 3 degrees of separation, if not less, from a lot of your greatest heroes. And so, it's an opportunity to connect with them. Now, we don't just do run-of-the-mill telesummits where I think what sets ours apart is that, my dad doesn't just ask the rote questions. He spends like 6 hours preparing for every single interview, and he knows most of these people personally, and he's read all their books. And so the conversation is at a level where we're really getting into some serious stuff, And so it's our audience is people who are, some of them are new to food issues, but a lot of people are fairly informed. They're eating better than the norm, and they want to go further, and they want to be spokespeople and advocates, and they want to take care of the people they love. And so it gives them that opportunity. And so, the Food Revolution Summit, the next one's April 30th to 8th. We're totally stoked. We're actually expecting over 250,000 people this year in the summit. Wow. And, I'm excited about it, but I think that the core model has worked so well for us because it's a really solid model that the telesummit industry is getting pretty saturated right now. There's so many people doing them, but what I think we don't have too much of is really quality content. We never have too much of that. But we've got a lot of summit mills going on where people produce a summit and they just race through it. And it's purely a list build. And they're trying to get, 1,000, 2,000 people on their list, but they're not really offering content that changes the world. So I think in any niche, in any marketing, one of the key questions is, who are you for and who are you not for? What's unique about you? And, if you try to be everything to everybody, you'll end up being nothing to nobody. So, so learning how to find your niche and clarify it and hone in on that is really critically important.
Yeah. And Alex, if I may, just one more follow-up question. Are you willing to share some of the metrics just to kind of give people an understanding of how it kind of trickles down? So if you have, 250,000 people, or let's just take this year's or last year's summit, maybe 100,000 people that participated.
Yeah.
Of that, how does it trickle down in terms of what can somebody expect if they have great content? On average, what sort of conversion rates were you seeing? And can you just speak to sort of the revenue model behind it?
Sure. I mean, typical in telesummits is conversions out of the opt-ins of, I see anywhere from 1% to 10%.
Wow. That's a huge difference.
In the world, broadly. In our launches, we've seen anywhere from 2.4% to 6.6% who of the opt-ins who then end up becoming buyers. And so I would say, I'm just adjusting a little because I seem to be getting washed out with light here. I would say that in our particular case, and our price point is $67 to $97 generally for the empowerment package that we're offering, and then some people get an upsell. Our affiliates have done really well promoting it. They earned about $1.25 per click last year for promoting the free summit. And, like I said, we work hard to combine integrity, high-quality products, high-quality free resources, and strong marketing that helps people really understand the benefits of what we're offering, So that's all in there. And, we've had tremendous results, and it's helped to fuel our work and our staff and our ability to run campaigns. We're committed to GMOs being labeled. We want to get routine use of antibiotics out of factory farms. We want to see sugary soda taxed and the revenues used to fund, health education and obesity prevention with low-income communities. And we think all of these goals are achievable. And so we're an education and advocacy organization. So all the revenues that come in from our summits and empowerment packages go first to our affiliates and then to help fuel our work. And so I feel so grateful to be in this model and to be having the success that we are.
Yeah, it's hard to believe, but we're already at a quarter till here. Alex, you want one more question, and then we'll give Ocean one more chance to talk about the food revolution, where people can go to find out more information.
Just the future, Ocean. What's your prediction of where we'll be 5 years from now? Online, that is most likely 35 years in dog years, usually, in my experience. Where would we be 5 years from, say, let's say 2021? How will people have a different relationship with food, given where the economy is going and socioeconomic?
Well, I mean, the trends I see are that I think what we're going to see is we're going to see corporate food giants that are changing. So right now we've got the health brands, and then we've got everything else. And everything else is the mothership for a lot of companies that are actually buying up natural brands. I mean, 80% of the natural brands are owned by big corporate food giants. I think we're going to see more blurring of those lines. I think that we're going to see more healthy offerings from Kellogg's and General Mills and, quite frankly, even McDonald's. I mean, they're piloting some experiments with kale and quinoa in the restaurants and even organic foods. They're trying to figure out what the heck works. I think we're going to start to see corporate food industry that's more accountable to health conscious consumers, not just in their marketing, but in their actual products. And we're going to see a simplifying. I think we're going to see shorter ingredients lists on products, as people don't want to have to eat 50 ingredients in one chip, And quite frankly, I think we're going to see shorter supply chains. I think we're going to see more local. And so that's where I think we're headed. I think we're going to continue to see more organic. I think more and more people are going to become alarmed as data comes out about the impact of pesticides on our health, realizing these are neurotoxins we're spraying on our food. I think people are going to say, hey, I actually don't want to eat that stuff. And so my sense is that's where we're headed. I think we're headed towards less, not more, GMO agriculture. I'm sure there'll be some new GMO crops that try to get introduced. Whether or not they'll be introduced is anyone's guess. Whether or not we get GMO labeling is a hot issue right now. But I think a lot of people want it, and I think a lot of people are going to keep fighting for it until we do get it. So these are some of the issues that I see going on. I think antibiotics are not going to be in such widespread use in factory farms. I think animals are going to be treated better, not worse. I think that's where we're headed, because when you look at the consumer interest in the issue, most people don't want to see animals tortured. I think people who eat meat especially have an interest in seeing animals treated decently before they're killed. And so I think that, these are some of the places where basically what's happening is that the internet and the speed of information is creating more and more informed population. And as we become more informed, we become more aware and conscious, and that consciousness is making visible some of the ways that corporate practices are out of step with public interest. And so I think that companies are becoming more and more called to account on that, and that's going to shift policies.
Yeah, that's I don't even dare to guess where food is going, because that's why we bring people like Ocean on who can actually speak with knowledge and insight. So I hope that all of the things that you're talking about certainly come to fruition, because that would be amazing. Yeah. So what I'm standing for,
obviously I could point out a utopian future, and I could point out a really, really dark one. But many variations thereof. But I personally like to stand for what's possible. If you're riding a bike and you look at a pothole and you're like, don't hit that pothole, there's a pretty darn good chance you're going to hit the pothole. So you have to look where you want to go if you want to get there. Yeah. And that's what I try to apply to my vision for our society.
I'll tell you, Steve, my issue is not that it's not moving fast enough. But if you just look at McDonald's and a lot of the heat that they've gotten from movies and supersize and all this stuff. Okay, right. They do have salad, right? They are moving slowly in a direction, and it's a far cry from where they've been. I just remember the fried apple pies, which were delicious when I used to eat them.
I missed those.
All that other stuff that they had. So they are moving in a direction. I've seen the same thing with Bob Evans and other fast food. So I think pressure is, and eating habits has started it. And quite frankly, you know, I don't know what it's like in the Midwest, but in California and parts of the East Coast, we do help because we're very health conscious. At my kids' school, I have teachers who go to Whole Foods and take off the stickers off of the apples because they think that's toxic, you know, when the apples actually have stickers. So, you know, there's all different grades, but I think there is a movement of going more health conscious and going more whole. People don't even know what a whole food is. They don't even know what that means. And so it's interesting.
Yeah. Awesome.
Totally true. I mean, absolutely. And, you know, I think that the exciting thing is that we're making change. And the disturbing thing is that there's a lot of sort of window dressing, you know, corporate food giants that are trying to appeal to health conscious consumers, but they're doing so with their marketing department, right? Not with their actual product sourcing. And McDonald's is a decent example. I mean, yes, they're doing salads. That means people who go there can get something green. That's awesome, right? But let's look at where the calories are actually coming from. They're mostly coming from the dressing, which is full of genetically engineered fats, and there's coming from the turkey, which is from a factory farmed bird that probably couldn't even lift a single wing its entire life and lived in abject misery. So you know, yes, it's nice that we're getting some vegetables in there, but I'll be happy when they have some real vegetables without all the junk, and they're organically growing, right? That would be a really nice vision. And I don't know that I'm holding out for McDonald's because let's face it, they're fundamentally a profit-driven institution. And what we need is we need a food. I say food 1.0 is about survival, and food 2.0 is a commodity. It's about commerce, and food 3.0 is about health. We make health the central organizing principle of our food system, and that's what we need as consumers. That's what we need from government policy, and quite frankly, that's what we need from the food industry.
Yeah, terrific. All right, let's do this one more time, which is give out the URL there of the Food Revolution Summit. And then if people want more information about you personally, where's the best place for them to go, Ocean?
Absolutely. Well, the foodrevolutionsummit.org is really the best place to go. You can also go to foodrevolution.org and check out our blog and see articles I've written and our team is putting out and the work that we're doing. And you can like us on Facebook if you go to Food Revolution Network on Facebook. But foodrevolutionsummit.org is a great place to just check out what we're already up to and last year's summit and all the great speakers, and then get on the list so you'll be sure to be notified about next year.
All right, terrific. Well, Ocean, really do appreciate you joining us here on Push Button Influence. We're going to end the podcast version. We're going to go into the green room to answer your questions. And then for a special pre-Oscar party, we're going to be doing some fun stuff around that as well, which is one of the reasons why you want to join us every Wednesday at 4 p.m. Pacific for Push Button Influences. We are live on Blab. So I'm going to do this, man. I just got to give you a big, thumbs up and say thank you so much for being here and just keep up the amazing work. So Alex, for you, my man, and always a pleasure to share the screen here with you. I think you're either that way or that way, but always a pleasure to share the screen with you here on Push Button Influence. So for Alex Mandossian, for Ocean Robbins, and for myself, Steve Olsher, this is Push Button Influence, and we're going to go into the green room here where you can ask Ocean your questions right after this fancy little exit music.
You just learned how to broadcast your brilliance. Tune in live to blab.im, Wednesdays at 4 p.m. Pacific, as the world's leading influencers share their proven strategies for leveraging the power of new media. For more information about your hosts, Alex Mandossian and Steve Olsher, to claim your free surprise gift and to access every episode of Push Button Influence, visit pushbuttoninfluence.com.